Welcome to the Wilmac Wire. I'm Emily Miller, joined by my co-host, Steve McDonnell. On this show, we talk with the drivers, the leaders, innovators, and decision makers pushing customer interaction technology and AI forward. And because we're proud to call Western New York home, we also spotlight the drivers in our own community, the people and organizations shaping growth and innovation right here. Let's get into it. Hey, Steve, how's your week going so far?
It's been a good week, exciting week here.
As always, I expect nothing less. For our listeners, welcome to the Wilmac Wire. That was a tough one, a lot of W's in there. I recorded today's episode with our guest Neal Dlin a few weeks ago, and Steve unfortunately wasn't able to make it onto the episode because he was on an on-site visit with a customer. Something we talked about with Bob Duffy in our last episode was the announcement and launch of Wilmac Constant WFM. So Steve, how did that on-site visit go?
Good. Yeah, that was the week I was prior to our launch. So we were doing a little product roadshow. I believe that day we were within New York State, though, which is exciting as we went to a lot of counties that week. But we weren't with a customer. We were with a prospective prospect. I think I was up in Saratoga. And yeah, we were showing everybody our new Wilmac Continuity WFM solution that's gotten a lot of traction, a lot of positive feedback, and we're super excited about it.
Yeah, I know Bob was super excited about it too. Obviously in today's conversation with Neal, he's in a little bit of a separate space, but I had to say okay to you missing this episode. He had a great reason for it. So glad to hear that conversation with those counties went well, and it's still going well. We're still rolling here with Constantly WFM. So excited there. On to today's episode now. Our guest is Neal Dlin, who is a customer service experience leader at Aviso Wealth. That is based up in Toronto. He is a key part of the GTAC community, which is the Greater Toronto Area Contact Center Association. You've heard of that before, Steve, right? We've worked with them a few times.
Yeah, they're great up in Toronto. Our guys know them well up in Toronto. We've had a lot of success with them. Neal particularly knows the contact center world. Especially up in that area, inside and out. So super informative interview. I'm sure the audience is going to really enjoy it. He is a ball. He has a wealth of knowledge in the contact center space that Emily dives into. Works for an interesting company that has large contact centers for wealth management. So very interesting, very geared towards more of our continuity replay and contact center side of the business, but awesome stuff.
Yeah, and I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but just pulling some of those topics that Neal and I had discussed really revolved around, like you said, his contact center experience and his leadership within that space. He's actually a top 25 CX and contact center thought leader. This is like his 6th year in a row receiving that honor, which was really cool. But he talks a lot about culture, which I thought was interesting, because so often the contact center space, people view the culture poorly. Agents aren't happy. I'm on Reddit often, a lot of subreddits for angry agents. So he hit on that a lot and how the technology plays a role in that, how change management plays a role in that. So really excited to let you guys listen to this episode. Steve, anything else to add before we jump over to it?
No, I think everyone will really enjoy it. Neal's great. Thanks to Neal for hopping on and enjoy the episode.
All right, we'll turn it over now. All right, today's intro, I'm going to do it a little bit different for you, Neal. I'm going to do a little bit of a starting lineup type-esque intro. I was a college athlete, so I'm taking me back to my glory days here. But I'm going to take a hard guess on your height as well. So coming in at 6 feet tall, I'm guessing from the height difference, since we're only on Zoom right now, since this is virtual, from the Greater Toronto Area with 30 plus years in the customer experience industry, recognized as an ICMI top 25 CX and contact center thought leader now for the 6th year in a row. Currently the VP of Customer Service Experience at Aviso Wealth, and with a significant background in CX consulting, especially with a focus on building experience-centered cultures. Welcome, Neal Dlin, to the Wilmac Wire. Thanks for coming.
Wow. Thanks for having me, and thanks for adding about 3 inches to my height. I appreciate that.
It's so funny because I'm tall. I'm about 6 feet tall, and every time we hop on a virtual call and I meet someone in person, they're like, "Wow, you're taller than I thought." So I took a generous guess.
That was kind. I mean, I'll take 6 feet. I mean, in my dreams, I'll take it.
I love it. Learn something new now. All right, Neal, thanks for joining me on the Wilmac Wire. How are things going? How's your fall been so far?
Good, good. Fall has have just started, really, right? But
Yeah.
it feels like it's been going for a while. It's been really busy. It's like, I think a lot of companies are in the same boat where you have ambitious projects lined up for the year, and then
Yep.
you hit fall, and you're running out of time, and so it becomes like that last push. So
Yeah.
it's very busy right now. Yeah. How
Yeah.
how about you? How's your fall?
It's been good. It's been like fairly warm because I know we're just across the lake from each other, but it's been fairly warm. I'm starting to see leaves changing, but I'm trying to mentally prepare myself for the winter that's coming upon us. But I do
Yeah.
love the holiday season, so excited for that. But yeah, same here. Our fiscal year wraps up actually October 31st, so
Hmm.
we're in grind time right now. So yeah, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me on the podcast today. I'm excited to have
My
this
pleasure.
chat. All right, let's start with kind of the basics. How did you get into the customer experience space, Neal?
I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I had this dream of being in the customer experience phase. No, I said no child ever. I got I mean, like many other people, I got a job, wasn't intending for it to be permanent 30 plus years ago in a contact center on the phones. And truth be told, I really hated it. I mean, in fairness, it was outbound telemarketing. It was a
Yeah.
harder of the hard contact center roles. Um, and so I got promoted, and then I kept getting promoted, and seemed to have an affinity for it.
Mm.
Eventually moving up progressively to having executive accountability and setting service strategy globally, and then moving beyond just contact centers into both the customer and employee experience and how they all, weave together. So
Yeah.
I happened upon it like many other people.
Yeah, that is a really consistent theme in this space, which I find so interesting. Like you said no child ever was I like think OCX. That's what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
very cool. And you've been at a few different places now. How has that experience kind of changed in your different roles?
It's interesting to see in some ways the evolution of the space, and in some
Mm.
ways nothing's changed in the space. um, I was really lucky, I think, early on to have every role in the contact center space, which is not always common. And so just understanding all the levers and how, if you focus really heavily on handle time, what's going to happen to quality, workforce management, all of the different things that interact, and how you have to be careful on how you manage different metrics and levers. But as I've sort of grown up in the space and been in a lot of different organizations or done consulting for organizations, it's clear that many companies still have a desire to have great CX, but don't necessarily have the discipline or rigor,
Hmm.
or when push comes to shove and prioritization is at stake. Oftentimes, CX can get pushed down,
Right.
seemingly short-sighted, because most of the reasons it gets pushed down, most of the priorities that win, would actually benefit greatly from those CX projects. And really progressive companies understand that, but sadly, most companies still don't. And that hasn't really changed. So there's a lot of talk, discussion. It's on the tongues of CEOs, and it's talked about in surveys and studies. But how does that really materialize? Oftentimes, it's shortchanged because of something else that seems to be more of a fast ROI or a direct connection.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely see that often. Like, because obviously we work with a lot of contact centers, and it's so often leadership is like, that's a cost center. It's hard to sell that value. And then to get the buy-in, hey, we want you to implement AI, go figure it out, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so it's,
Everyone has to implement AI tomorrow.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But you've had a vast amount of experience in the space. Like I mentioned in your intro, you were named to ICMI's top 25 CX and contact center thought leaders for the 6th year in a row. And I saw a lot of familiar faces from the GTAC community on there. But what does a recognition like that mean for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about that lately. I think people always want to give the right answer, oh, it's very
Mhm.
humbling, and it is very humbling, but it's also very validating. I
Mhm.
think not bad to admit that. I think that if you have been working really hard in this space and um, trying to do things differently than they've always been done and getting recognition for it is validating. It is actually also really humbling. I mean, the list of
Yeah.
people that get named to that, some of them are people I follow and learn from and look up to. And so it's very humbling. And I'd say lastly, it just puts a little bit of good pressure
Yeah.
to live up to it because look, I mean, how many of us call into a contact center or interact with the company's website or and just are frustrated? I mean, I don't think a day goes by
Yeah.
where, where one of us doesn't, where you don't have a frustrating experience with some company you work with. And so, and the reality is, especially from auditing companies, is
Hmm.
that people are following the practices they think everybody else is following just because, in some cases, just because everybody else is following them, not
Hmm.
because they're serving or delivering on an exceptional experience. And so I think thought leadership is important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of young thought leaders coming out that I'm just so jazzed about. And I guess, like I said, I learn from. But us old folks, we still got a few tricks up our sleeves, and it puts the pressure to keep challenging the status quo and asking why we do things the way we do, and are there other ways to do them to deliver the experiences we're trying to create.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm very motivated by like competition and pressure personally. But obviously you've been living up to that pressure because you've kept receiving that recognition, which is incredible. But kind of in that same line, like the one of the main things that's talked about with your like digital footprint is around the culture piece of contact centers. And like you mentioned, kind of the customer experience, but also the employee experience. I also mentioned it in the intro, but that experience centered culture is what you reference often. What does that really look like in practice?
Yeah, I think I get asked that question a lot, and I probably answer it differently every time, just because I keep thinking about it. I'm always sort of trying to think about it. I think at the starting place for me is almost dropping words like employee and customer or
Hmm.
boss or peer. Those words oftentimes seem to somehow differentiate from human or, fellow human or person, right? And so they give us permission, they grant us some license to treat somebody a little differently than we might just any other person on the street, any other human being. And so I think the first step is just remembering that everybody we interact with are people. They're
Hmm.
people that have all kinds of challenges in their life, in and out of work. They're people that have storied experiences, sometimes that don't reflect in their resume, that are valuable, or a customer that may not be high worth today has things in their story that you don't know about that can make them high worth tomorrow. And so I just think, we often forget and we defer to policy and we defer to process, that we forget that people are people and that stands for everybody and everyone deserves respect and everyone deserves to be heard and valued. And that sort of sits at the center of all the work I try to do. And the second thing I'll say, or the second part to that answer is, I have the weirdest ears. These things never stay in properly. The second part to that answer is, we all know, and there's lots of data that shows really engaged employees are more likely to create a great customer experience.
Hmm.
And that's lovely. And it's true. I don't like to leave it to chance, so I try to look at it and my team, and I've always had great teams, who have often outshone me in terms of their thinking around this. But I try to think about, well, what does that customer experience look like from an emotional standpoint? I always start there. What I want them to feel if they're calling the call center, and they hang up the phone. What would they say to the person beside them about that experience? What are the exact words they would use? And what words do we want them to use? And what are those emotions and those experiences we want them to have? And so if we think about that, let's say you want someone to feel, depending on your brand, if you're a prestige brand with a concierge like the experience that you're trying to maintain or build, you want them to feel pampered maybe.
Mhm.
Another company might want them to feel, they want the customer to feel intelligent. It's interesting when you call a tech company, for example, it's easy to to feel like you're condescended to
Yeah.
because the person knows so much more than you do. So do you want them to feel that way, or do you want them to feel
Right.
respected and intelligent? So you think about what those emotional, touchstones are that are really important to you. So once you've established that, you kind of reverse engineer back. Well, what would the employee journey need to look like for all that to be true? Would you hire different people? Would you train them on different things? Would you measure different goals? Would you celebrate different successes? What would you change in the employee journey that you would need to change in order to make those emotional experiences true for the customer? And in doing so, you end up creating a far more engaged employee because you're hiring people that are more likely going to get gratification out of the work. You're recognizing those incredible special things that they bring that drive those outcomes. So that's very gratifying. They're likely, hopefully, you're building your employee development and your growth programs into employees that demonstrate those skills, which are highly transferable into leadership, as an aside. So how do you really purposely and by design create both that employee and customer experience so that it isn't just if they're engaged, they might do something great, but they get engagement out of doing something great. They get engagement out of doing that exact thing that you're trying to build for the customer because you've built it that way. And so that's sort of that second part. So the first part is everyone's a human, start there, everyone's a person, and then design it the way you want it to be, very, very mindfully, and execute it very consistently. Don't fall off on any of those sort of promises that you make in those experiences.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, that's the first time I've heard that answer, and that was awesome. Well done.
Yay!
You passed the test. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, I really love the way you thought about that and kind of talked through it. We've had so much experience in this space from the technological side of things that you don't really stop to think about the emotional piece of it. And like you said, I'm on the marketing side. Like brand is huge for me. How closely the call center plays into the brand, and okay, you're hiring pretty much based on what that brand alignment looks like, even tying in like core values and what they stand for. Um, it's interesting to hear kind of how that can all tie together in the call center space. Because I know it's something we emphasize here at Wilmac. We're obviously not a call center, but yeah, really interesting. Appreciate you walking me through that. Makes sense why you're on the list, right?
Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna kind of tweak where we're going just a little bit. But we also like to talk often in the contact center and CX space about transformation. It's a big word in
Mm.
and of itself, but it's also a big buzzword. In most cases, though, they talk about transformation, but contact center leaders struggle with, or they don't see the results that they want to see with it in many cases. From your perspective, why do so many transformations fall short?
It's so funny, I was talking to somebody recently about our 3-year transformation here at Aviso, and I always sort of say, but it's not really 3 years, it's forever. I mean, the world is changing around us, other businesses are changing. No one wants to just remain stagnant, but certainly you may have timing around specific projects, and I think they fail for a number of reasons. One of the reasons that transformations fail is change management,
Yeah.
and change management oftentimes is put on the shoulders of some team that's supposed to be the change management team, as if it's only their responsibility. Or in other cases, change management is looked at from a technology change management perspective, which is
Okay.
very different from a people change management perspective. And oftentimes those two things don't marry together very well. So I think a lot of the times it's just preparation planning. Who needs to know what and when? How do you prepare everybody? How do you get them on board and excited? Oftentimes, I see companies wait far into a project before they even tell the people that are going to be affected by it, whether it be the employees who are going to use a new tool or customers. They don't share much about it. They don't get any input from those users,
Hmm.
really, until it's so far baked that even if they're going to make some adjustments based on that feedback, they can't make sort of, fundamental changes.
Yeah.
And oftentimes all kinds of crazy things happen. Things get trained to employees or customers that don't resemble the final product, or they get trained when there is no product to train on, or they get trained and then a long delay happens until they get launched, and so that training is very perishable if you don't apply it right away. So there's a bunch of things around change that always drive challenges in transformation. Data silos drives things in transformation. You may have an expectation, let's say, of driving some level of personalization. I'll stick with contact centers. So you're going to drive some personalization through the contact center. That hinges on customer data being integrated into contact center systems, hinges on segmentation and marketing data being integrated into customer systems, hinges on data coming back from the contact center against the customer record. And in most organizations, those things don't speak well together. And if the integrations are built, they're built for a single purpose. So they're not very reusable, and then you end up with a Franken data system, and so that breaks a lot of transformation as well. Just the challenge of getting data centralized, flowing between systems, giving the right information to the right people. And then the last thing I'd say about transformation is what was the transformation for? I was just in a meeting the other day,
Yeah.
and it was a committee for something, and I said, someone said to me, "Oh, we're thinking about changing the structure of this committee because people feel it's not interactive enough." And I said, "Well, it really isn't very interactive, but don't change it to be interactive just for the sake of being interactive. What are we actually trying to accomplish? Like, let's not lose sight of that. What is the purpose of this committee? What is the outcome of this project or this initiative? How are we tracking against it? And how will the structure of this meeting serve it? And how will we measure that to see that it does or doesn't serve it?" I think that's what happens with a lot of transformation is we lose sight of the objective. We stop talking about the objective. We never challenge if it's the right objective. What problem does it actually solve, or is it just a shiny new toy, So there's a lot of stuff around really putting the time in to establish what is the purpose, what is it really solving, how do we make sure that all of the pieces are moving towards that and have crystal clear vision into what the outcome's supposed to look like and how they play their part and what their role is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just curious, like, I believe you mentioned at Aviso, you guys have somewhere around 100 agents. How do you think transformation scales between an 100 agent versus a 10 agent versus an 1,000 agent contact center?
Yeah, I mean, I've run centers from tens to thousands. I've had clients with tens of thousands of agents. It definitely runs differently. But it's funny. I will say that when you've got a team of 10, you don't have to have anywhere near the same rigor you do in a larger team, because you see everybody, you know everybody, you talk to them every day. You can just tell them all things and keep them involved all throughout. It's much, much easier in a very small team. That being said, I've seen centers of tens of thousands outperform centers of hundreds. If you have discipline, if you have support structures in place, do you have dedicated training? Because a lot of contact centers, for example, will leverage a shared training model with the organization, which can be challenging to really understand the nuance of the role, and also get people when you need them, or their training is exclusively focused on new hire training. So you don't have a dedicated team thinking about, well, how do we train out change? So just having a dedicated training team, I like to see training, knowledge, and quality all roll up to one team, because one is teaching, one is auditing, and one is reinforcing.
Yeah.
And one is a resource supplying. So, that's really important to have those things established, good tools and good structure. From a workforce management perspective, and this is where small teams can actually fall apart quite often, because small teams often run at I would say a dangerously high occupancy for their size.
Okay.
In big contact centers, it's easier to get a higher occupancy, but still have room to do important things like training and coaching and team meetings. Whereas in smaller centers, you're very much victim to volume spikes and changes that even small changes can really, put you behind. And so it becomes harder to build in enough time between shrinkage and occupancy. And I'm speaking WFM, speak for all the WFMs out there, and they'll probably correct me because I'm probably using the terms wrong. But truthfully, how much slack do you have in your staffing model? If
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to simplify that without using those terms, how much slack do you have in the staffing model to allow you to build in those touch points, training or coaching or team meetings around all of the changes that you're trying to roll out? Because it requires a lot, and it requires you to have that. And if you have a CFO who's just expecting every minute of an agent's time to be interacting with a customer, that's going to be a really poor performing call center, and likely high attrition, likely low CSAT, low ESAT,
Yeah.
and change is certainly not going to roll out well.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I like the perspective, and I'll let you know if we get any comments from the workforce people.
That's not occupancy, that's utilization. I mix the two. I think everybody mixes those two things up way too often. But anyways,
Hey, I'm good. So I'll let you know of the comments, though. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna go a little bit to what you kind of mentioned in our kind of transformation conversation around the siloed data piece.
hmm
It's another major pain point that a lot of our customers deal with, a lot of the folks that we deal with. How have you or our peers and that you've worked with or know, how have they tried to break through that challenge?
you're assuming that someone has.
Yeah.
I think there's degrees of success in that way,
Okay.
right? But I think the first thing is like, can you tell a story about what tomorrow could look like?
Hmm.
So, but what could it look like? What could the experience be as a customer goes and buys a product in the store, or purchases it on the website and has to return it, or wants to write a review about it, or gets a special offer? All of these things that you might draw out a beautiful picture. Um, yeah, I remember a story that I heard at a conference, and I want to give the guy credit, and I can't remember his name, but he was talking about like a nature store, and how does if the call if you have a customer and you know enough about them between publicly available information and information within your systems, you know that they're traveling to another city to do a hike, and there's a store near them. Like they might be calling up saying, I got to order these shoes, these hiking shoes, because I'm going on this trip. Oh, what hotel are you staying at? There's a store near there. We can have them waiting for you, in the with the concierge when you get there. Maybe I can recommend these hikes to you. All these different things that an incredible experience that you could create, but it hinges on that data being accessible and delivered to
Right.
an agent, and not just having access to the system, because that can be overwhelming. But as you start to leverage AI and other tools, how do you serve it to the agent? How does
Yeah.
it pop up for the agent to say, hey, mention this, mention that store, hey, tell them about this hike? Maybe there's a hashtag you want to share that customers use when they do that hike. Like there's so many cool things that you can do that don't come off as a creepy sales pitch, but really just how do I help you as a customer live your best life related to our brand? It hinges on really good data. And so I think if you can tell the story of what you imagine and then start asking the question of what are the gaps today that stop us from doing this? I think that's illuminating for a lot of companies, that even though it might seem obvious, once you have that conversation, they're like, oh, this system would have to, and that system runs a batch file, that would never work. We'd have to do real, and all of a sudden the wheels start spinning and things start changing for teams. And of course, having the right people in that room when you tell that story, like who owns the systems, who owns the data, who's using it for what purpose, how do we make sure all these things connect? So I believe in bringing in the right people and painting and I love using a story, to say, imagine we did this, what would we have to change today to get to that stage? And it'll always lead to, more centralization of data, more integration of systems, and tools like AI to help, pull the right pieces at the right time.
Yeah. Let me dig a little bit uh,
That's as
specifically.
deep as I get on this topic.
No,
No, I'm kidding.
I
Go
like
ahead.
it. It's as deep as I get, just as a heads up.
Yeah, yeah, I'm at my end. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. So on Wilmac's side of things, we deal a lot with the interaction data, the call recordings, the web chats, the emails going on within the call center. We tend to work more often on or with organizations who are subject to like the retention regulations on that data. So in many cases, our customers are coming to us and they're like, oh, I have 7 years worth of recordings and nice activity that I have an indefinite retention period on. I've got my active nice CX1 system going now. Like I'm in an audit. I don't know, like when we changed over, there's some data in both. How do I access it? How does, like, going back to what we were just talking about, what has your experience been in kind of that sort of world where it's kind of the compliance piece, but also like we're starting to get more interest in, okay, I want to leverage this data for AI and it needs to be accessible to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's still some of the things that you just talked about are sort of
Mhm.
like older problems that
Yeah.
still exist, and some of them are newer problems that are emerging. I think that there's always challenges in moving data when you grandfather out a system or you migrate. Like you mentioned, CCAS platforms and call recordings. That's a challenge. I have found that a lot of the times when we buy software, there's questions we don't ask up front because we don't think about it until the problem surfaces. So, trying to create and speak to those people that have gone through migrations or have gone through those audits to say, what wasn't and was easily available in
Hmm.
order to sort of build that into your software selection, or if you're looking at a partner who can help pull that data or integrate that data, what are those questions? We have I'm thinking about a CRM platform where the system does log and track every single interaction that an agent has with a case,
Okay.
but it doesn't naturally provide you an audit without taxing the performance of the system.
Okay.
So it's like who would have thought? Of course, the system's tracking everything, but you actually can't audit it because it would burden the system too much. So
Yeah.
who would think to ask those kinds of questions?
Right.
I think that it's very exciting getting new software.
Hmm.
Sometimes too exciting, and you get distracted by bells and whistles that don't actually serve your need.
Yeah.
I think you have to be disciplined about, what are those things that aren't as sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. And an agent can get this pop up, and the customer will get this. Okay, but now there's been an issue, and because there's a complaint, or there's a fraud, or there's, and how do you get at that information easily,
Hmm.
and meeting any regulatory requirements? So I just think having putting together that list of questions and making sure that's part of either your selection or
Yeah.
seeking out a partner who can help you access that data.
Yeah. Yeah. And I so often, being on the technology side of things, view transformation as like, oh, the technology transformation, and technology tends to be a smaller part of that. But you mentioned it, and it was one of the questions in here that I didn't even need to ask you for you to answer, but about how there is typically a disconnect between, okay, this piece of technology and what I expect out of it. Like you said, a lot of times we're getting buyers are getting, like, I'm struggling with the word right now. But they're thinking of,
Told?
yeah, bamboozled with a lot of like those shiny new features, and they're getting pressure from leadership, like we talked about, in terms of, okay, you need to adopt AI and like let's rip and replace and do this, and it's so tough because in every call center is so unique and different, and like to expect an out of the box solution, I just don't feel like that's feasible. So yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate you kind of going into that, but
I would even just add to that firstly, every sales pitch is always going to be better than the product.
yeah.
I think we should all know that by now. Secondly, they work in often demo environments that are perfectly stable because there's no burden and performance
Hmm.
issues. There's no major out of the box functionality built into those demos. And if there is, it's on a single system, on someone's laptop, usually not hosted in a cloud with many
Hmm.
users accessing it. And so, yeah, you get a picture of a product that is, if all things are perfect, this is how it might look and perform. But also, and this happens with clients, it's like, why are you guys buying this software?
Hmm.
And they start talking about, it can do this and it can do that. And I'm like, was that your problem when you started looking for this software?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, but once we got the demo, we started seeing it and we could see how we could apply it. And it's like, that's amazing. And maybe you can apply it and maybe it's got a great ROI and those are all great features, but you cannot forget what was the main problem you were trying to solve and what's the most important problem you're trying to solve with this software. And don't get distracted. Like, I got a car with, the best audio and windshield wipers and air conditioning and the seat contours to my body, but the engine doesn't go faster than 20 kilometers an hour. Kind of doesn't matter how good those bells and whistles are. And a
Right.
lot of software is like that. A
Yeah.
lot of software, there's not a good engine, but there's lots of good features. And
Yeah.
people get distracted and then they wonder why our calls are dropping, our performance is bad, there's echoes on the line. It's like, but that's the engine. And you were talking about the fact that you can do sentiment analysis,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing and valuable. But I would say first you got to make sure the car drives
Right.
before you start stressing about sentiment analysis. So yeah, I think that's a common.
Yeah.
We're all human beings. We all get
Right.
excited about cool toys, and so it happens too easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you were talking about with the transformation piece, like reminding yourself what is that core objective? Like, let me stay grounded and in this decision making process. But also, you mentioned it more recently too, but the partnership piece, like finding the right people to work with. It goes back to the people part of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it. I like it. I like it. All right, Neil, last question for you. I'm already at the end of my list. What the heck? Um, are there any
Great.
exciting projects that you have coming up that you'd like to share about with our listeners?
I mean, I don't think I have anything that is unique. I think a lot of companies, we're all trying to look at obviously the buzziest of the buzz, which is AI, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you leverage that more? I think we're taking a very focused approach on how does this serve our team uh, to serve our customer versus just like a lot of companies, sadly, is how do we reduce our headcount? Because I think going back to employee engagement and having the right people to deliver that experience, usually the person that's going to make a customer feel heard and valued and pampered and all those, whatever those words are you come up with, are not the same people that like to write detailed case notes, are the same people that like to scour through knowledge base articles to find the right one. So turning AI on, monotonous, mundane tasks, administrative tasks for our people so that they can add more value. It's funny, people talk about cost cutting and headcount cutting um, in companies, but if you talk to marketing, they'd be like, "Oh, can you just ask this also? Can you offer this also? Can you do that all?" We can't because we have our headcount is maxed out and there's no budget and we're barely making service level.
Yeah.
Well, start thinking about how do you leverage AI um, to add so that humans can just really add more value. And people often say that, but like it's true. If you shorten um, the administrative parts of an average handle time in a call center, you
Mm-hmm.
can add back in super value add, personalization,
Mm-hmm.
customization, offers, um, proactive service, proactive care, proactive retention and reach out. All of these things, and those can also be complemented through some automation and AI. I'm not saying it's exclusively people, but I do think that um, that's the stuff that we're focused on is how do we leverage AI so that we can free our team up to do more that an AI doesn't do. So we're looking at AI case summaries, AI agent assist, AI to build knowledge-based content. So looking at past call recordings, past case data to build more knowledge-based content, to build more self-serve tools, to allow AI agent to have chat bots and voice bots for the stuff that is an agent can do, with their eyes shut, and get them more focused on growing the business, retaining customers, building the brand, and not on mundane calls that are routine steps and things like that. That
Yeah.
frankly doesn't get our team any more jazz than it does the customer for having to call us. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. That the AI, that conversation has been very prevalent lately, but I just
Every company's name is now
yeah,
.ai.
yeah. Yeah, I've been on Reddit more often recently, like looking at the call center chats too, just to kind of better understand who we're working with. But that is the most common thing. They're like, yeah, AI, and everyone's talking about the voice bots and the chat bots, but not as many people are talking about the co-pilots that are meant to help agents be more efficient, which I find super interesting.
Totally.
But yeah, no, appreciate you sharing, and best of luck as you go through those endeavors. I'm sure it's gonna work out very well. So
No, I
well,
hope so.
yeah, not gonna wood. All right, Neal. I really appreciate you. Oh my gosh, being a guest on the Wilmac Wire today and joining me on the podcast. To our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Neal or follow along with what he's doing, you can find Neal on LinkedIn under Neal Dlin. He's got a lot of followers, so make sure to to follow along. Add to that count for him. And you'll likely see him on the next ICMI 2026 thought leaders too, speaking it into existence for you now, Neal.
I love that. Manifest it.
Manifest it. All right,
Yeah.
Neal, appreciate your time on the podcast today. And let's stay in touch for sure. All right.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for having me. I really
All right.
loved talking with you today.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Wilmac Wire. If you like today's conversation, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or watch full episodes on our YouTube channel. You can also learn more about Wilmac Technologies and our work in customer interaction technology at wilmactech.com. We'll be back soon with more conversations with the drivers, those shaping our industry and those building right here in Western New York. See you next time.